Let's talk about the trend line on the Alpha Prime. Now, with all trading, trend really is your friend. Ideally, you want to be trading with the trend, but not at the end of a trend, because that is where you can get caught out, either at the bottom, if you're trading a short, or at the top, if you're trading a long. However, unfortunately, we can't always see the future or predict what's going to happen, but we can sometimes get a good gauge on where it might be going. And the Alpha Prime helps you do this. So let's take a look at the trend line. First of all, make sure you've got Alpha Prime on your chart. Head on over to settings, which is identified by this little cog right here. And just in settings, we'll move that over so you can see. And we'll scroll down all the way to where it says trend menu. Now, we have also covered all of the moving averages and also the whole MA on a different video, so be sure to check that out. But the trend line works a little bit differently. In fact, it basically focuses on volatility of the asset. But before we get into that, let's take a look at what it looks like on the actual chart. You've got two ways to visualize the trend. The first one is by adding on the trend line. And the trend line gives an actual depiction of what the line would look like, and also the parameters of what it needs to be defined to change either an uptrend or a downtrend. If you don't like the line on there and you already have too many lines on your chart, then you can also opt for a candle color and you just select show trend direction. And this will essentially change all of the candles into a nice, easy to read and easy to follow trend direction, simply by coloring the candles bullish or bearish. As you can see here on this example, we see a downtrend signified by the bearish color of the candles, and then an uptrend here as well, signified by the bullish color of the candles. But this also harmonizes perfectly with the line, which is the trigger for it. There are a few settings to be aware of how you can actually customize this more to your preference. When back in the menu under the trend menu, simply go to length and also multiplier. These will actually change how the trend line reacts to the actual price movement. But let's explain what each of them do. The length, in most cases, when talking about indicators and settings, is defined by the number of bars. And where it says here, length 50, this is defined by 50 bars. But there's lots of clever calculations that go on within these bars. And the trend line is basically measuring the candle volatility. So it looks over the past 50 candles volatility. There is a few other things that happen in there as well. And most notably, the multiplier. The multiplier essentially multiplies the candle volatility by 4, and it can be changed to 2, 1, whatever. But this basically defines where the line will sit. But how does that work? Well, if we look at this line here, for instance, we are seeing that it's looking back over the past 50 candles and multiplying the volatility of the candles by 4. So when we get massive candles like this, we see a huge discrepancy between the trend line and also the price action here. But when the price starts to consolidate, we start to notice that the trend line starts to get a little bit closer. And this can basically signify that there is a change in trend direction. But what signifies the change in trend direction? Well, very simply, when the price crosses over the line. So as we can see here, the price has pumped through the trend direction, thus exceeding the historical volatility that is gauged within these parameters, the 50 and the 4. So when we break out of that, the theory is that we are now changing direction of trend because the price has exceeded the previous volatility. Let's try another setting as well. This time we'll go for something like 200 and let's go with 5. And this will give a huge swing on the volatility of the candles and basically really define macro trends, if you will. So if you're not that interested in capturing the shorter term trends and mainly the bigger trends, then you really want to be upping that multiplier quite high. And as you can see here, we have a much bigger macro trend in play. So as we come down this trend here, we see quite a big spike upwards. Now previously on the length of 50 and the multiplier of 4, this would have been considered an uptrend. However, when we put in a much bigger multiplier and also a much bigger look back on the length, then we see that this little pump here is skipped over and the trend is continued down. So you would have got some amazing gains off the back of that. I hope that gives a clear idea of how to use the trend line and also the trend menu for the Alpha Prime. Until next time.